I heard my son tell his wife I was just taking up space. Not mum, not her, just space, like furniture, like the old couch they'd been meaning to replace for years but never got around to moving. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, their kitchen technically, though my hands had scrubbed every inch of those counters for 3 years, holding a basket of laundry I'd just folded. Oliver's tiny socks, Emma's dance leotard, David's work shirts, the ones he never remembered to pick up from the dry cleaner before I started doing it for him. "She's not hurting anything," Rachel said, her voice careful, diplomatic, the way you'd talk about a stray cat you'd been feeding but weren't quite ready to keep. "It's been 3 years, Rach. We were supposed to have the house to ourselves by now. 3 years." He was right about that part. I'd moved in the week Oliver was born. Just temporarily, David had said, his face drawn with exhaustion, Rachel recovering from an emergency C-section, the baby screaming through the night. We need help, just until we get our feet under us." I'd packed a single suitcase, brought my medications, some comfortable clothes, the photo of Robert that usually sat on my nightstand. I'd thought I was coming for a month, maybe 6 weeks. That was April of 2021. It was now June of 2024. The suitcase sat in the corner of the guest room, my room I'd started thinking of it, though I'd never said that out loud, gathering dust. I'd unpacked it slowly, item by item, as temporary stretched into permanent, and no one thought to mention it. My retirement savings sat in the bank, mostly untouched. I'd offered to help with expenses in those early months, back when David still called me Mum instead of referring to me in the third person like I wasn't in the next room. He'd waved it away. "You're helping enough," he'd said. "We couldn't afford childcare anyway." That should have been a warning. Instead, I'd stayed. Cooked meals, changed diapers, scrubbed floors, picked up Emma from dance class every Tuesday and Thursday, grocery shopping on Wednesdays, laundry on Saturdays. I'd learned their rhythms, slotted myself into the gaps of their lives so seamlessly that I'd become invisible. Necessary, I'd thought. Needed. Just taking up space. I set the laundry basket down carefully on the dining table. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I walked back to my room, the guest room, I corrected myself silently, and closed the door. The suitcase was under the bed, right where I'd shoved it 36 months ago. I pulled it out. Dust came with it, 3 years' worth, coating my fingers grey. I sat on the edge of the bed, the suitcase at my feet, and tried to remember the last time someone had asked me what I wanted. Not what Oliver needed for lunch, not whether I could pick up milk on my way back from Emma's school. Not if I'd mind watching the kids Friday night so David and Rachel could have date night. What I wanted, I couldn't remember. The photo of Robert sat on the nightstand, dusty like everything else. He'd been gone 8 years. We'd had 43 years together before pancreatic cancer took him in 6 brutal months. I'd thought grief would kill me too, but it hadn't. I'd survived. Bought a small condo with the life insurance, started volunteering at the library, joined a book club. Then David called, and I'd packed that suitcase, and somewhere along the way I'd forgotten I'd ever been anything other than grandma, helper, free childcare, space. I picked up the photo. Robert smiled at me, forever 59, forever healthy, forever mine. "I think I made a mistake," I whispered to him. The house was quiet. Rachel had taken the kids to swimming lessons. David was at work. I was alone, which was rare, and the silence had weight to it. It pressed against my ribs, thick and textured, and for the first time in 3 years I noticed it wasn't uncomfortable. It was mine. I opened the suitcase. The lining was faded, the zipper stiff. I'd bought it for our honeymoon in 1977. Niagara Falls. 2 kids barely out of their teens who thought they'd figured out forever. Inside, a few things remained. A scarf I'd never worn here, a paperback mystery I'd never finished, a small jewelry box containing my mother's pearls. I'd packed light because I'd thought I was coming for a few weeks. I could pack light again. The first year I'd told myself it was temporary. Rachel had postpartum depression, the kind that made her cry in the middle of folding onesies, that kept her in bed some mornings until noon. I'd held Oliver, walked him through the house singing the same lullabies I'd sung to David, and thought, this is what grandmothers do. This is love. The second year, Rachel got better, went back to work part-time at the dental office. Emma started 1st grade. David got promoted. The house filled with noise and schedules and complications, and somehow I was always there, in the middle of it, smoothing the rough edges. "Mum, can you, Mum? Would you mind, Mum, if it's not too much trouble?" It was never too much trouble, until it was. The 3rd year, the requests stopped being requests. They became expectations, assumptions. I'd be there to pack Emma's lunch because I was always there. I'd pick up the dry cleaning because that's what I did on Thursdays. I'd have dinner ready at 6 because everyone knew Grandma liked to cook. No one asked if Grandma wanted to cook, if Grandma had other plans, if Grandma existed outside the walls of this house, where she'd somehow become part of the furniture. I'd heard Rachel on the phone with her sister 2 months ago, standing in the backyard, while I washed dishes inside. The window was open. May evening, warm, the breeze carrying her voice through the screen. "No, we don't pay for childcare. David's mum lives with us. She loves helping. Honestly, I think she needs the company." Needs the company. As if I was lonely and they were doing me a favour. As if I hadn't had a life before, friends before, plans before. As if I'd been sitting in my paid-off condo just waiting for them to rescue me from the terrifying burden of my own independence. I'd gripped the edge of the sink, my hands sudsy and red from the hot water, and said nothing. That was what I did, I realised now, sitting on the edge of the guest room bed with my ancient suitcase open at my feet. I said nothing. I absorbed. I accommodated. I disappeared into the wallpaper of their lives, and they'd stopped seeing me so gradually that no one noticed when I vanished completely. My wedding ring caught the light from the window, the small diamond Robert had saved 6 months to afford. I twisted it on my finger. It still fit, though my hands were thinner now, bonier, the skin loose and spotted with age. 74 years old, and I'd forgotten what it felt like to matter. The front door opened, Rachel's voice bright with the forced cheerfulness she used after swimming lessons when the kids were tired and whiny. "Okay, guys, quiet down. Grandma might be resting." I wasn't resting. I was sitting in a room that wasn't mine, in a house I'd maintained for 3 years, holding a suitcase and wondering how I'd let this happen. Emma's footsteps thundered past my door. Oliver's lighter ones followed. Rachel called after them about wet towels, about not tracking water through the house, and I heard her sigh, the particular sound of a mother's exhaustion. I stood, smoothed my shirt, checked my face in the mirror above the dresser. Still there, still me, though I looked older than I felt. When had that happened? I opened the door and went to help, because that's what I did. Rachel was in the kitchen, unpacking the swim bags, her hair damp at the temples. She looked up when I came in, smiled the quick, distracted smile she always gave me. "Oh good, you're up. Oliver needs a snack and Emma has homework and I'll handle it," I said. "Thanks, Margaret, you're a lifesaver." Margaret? That was new. She'd been calling me Mom for the first year, Margaret since then. Not meanly, just factually, like a co-worker, like someone useful, but not quite family. I made Oliver's snack. Apple slices, peanut butter, the crackers shaped like goldfish that he liked. Emma sprawled at the dining table with her math worksheet, and I helped her with the word problems while Rachel answered emails in the living room. Routine, familiar, the shape of my days for 1,095 days in a row. David came home at 6:30, loosening his tie, calling hello to no one in particular. He kissed Rachel, ruffled Emma's hair, scooped up Oliver. He didn't look at me, not meanly, not deliberately. He just didn't. I was part of the scenery, the reliable, invisible machinery that kept his household running. We ate dinner. I'd made pot roast the way David liked it. Everyone thanked me, the automatic kind of thanks you give to waitstaff. No one asked how my day was. No one asked anything. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen while Rachel put the kids to bed and David watched TV. The dishwasher hummed. The sink drained. Outside, through the window, I could see the park across the street, the one where I sometimes sat on the bench when I needed to pretend I had somewhere to go. I dried my hands on the towel, embroidered with "Home Sweet Home" in cursive letters, something Rachel had bought, and stood there in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my usefulness. The house was worth $400,000. David and Rachel's combined income was comfortable. They had savings, retirement accounts, a second car. They weren't struggling anymore, hadn't been for 2 years at least. They just liked having free help. I walked back to my room, closed the door, sat on the bed. The suitcase was still open, still mostly empty, still waiting. Robert's photo looked at me from the nightstand. I picked it up, held it in both hands. "I don't think they see me anymore," I told him. "I don't think they remember I'm a person." The house creaked around me, settling into night. Down the hall, Emma laughed at something. Rachel murmured to Oliver. David's TV droned. No one called for me. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't get up to check if they needed anything. I sat there in the dim room and let the silence press down. It was heavy, that silence, but it was mine. The next morning, I woke to Oliver crying. 6:45 a.m. Rachel's alarm hadn't gone off, or she'd hit snooze one too many times. I heard David curse softly in their room, heard the bed springs creak. I lay there for 5 seconds, 10, 15, waiting to see if they'd get him. They didn't. I got up, put on my robe, went to Oliver's room. He was 3 now, big enough to mostly sleep through the night, but sometimes he had bad dreams. I picked him up, felt his hot, teary face against my shoulder, and carried him downstairs. By the time Rachel emerged, dressed for work and moving fast, I had Oliver fed and calm, cartoons on the TV, and coffee brewing. "You're an angel," she said, grabbing her travel mug without slowing down. An angel. Not a person, not a woman with her own needs and her own life. An angel. A fairy godmother. A convenient, invisible solution to their problems. David came down 10 minutes later. He was on the phone, his voice tight with frustration. "No, Mum's not a problem. She's just... Look, it's complicated." He saw me standing in the kitchen and turned away, lowering his voice, but I heard anyway. The walls in this house were thin, and I'd learned to move quietly, to be present without being noticed. "She's been here 3 years, Carl. 3 years. It was supposed to be temporary, but now it's like, I don't know, she's part of the furniture, taking up oxygen." Taking up oxygen. That was what I was. Space, furniture, oxygen consumption. I set down the dish towel, walked back to my room, closed the door. I didn't cry. I was surprised by that. I'd always been a crier, at movies, at weddings, at commercials with puppies. But this was too big for tears, too clean and final, like a bone breaking. Sharp, then numb. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, and understood something I should have understood months ago. They didn't love me less. They'd just stopped seeing me at all. I'd become infrastructure, plumbing, a necessary system that kept things running, but didn't require thought or gratitude or attention. The suitcase was still under the bed. I pulled it out again, set it on top of the quilt, and looked at it for a long time. Robert and I had travelled before he got sick. Not extensively, we'd never had the money for Europe or Asia, but we'd seen the Grand Canyon, driven through the Smoky Mountains, spent a week at a cabin in Maine. We'd talked about doing more after he retired. Maybe an RV, maybe volunteer work in national parks. We'd had plans. I'd had plans. When had I stopped having plans? I opened my dresser, started folding clothes into the suitcase. Practical things: jeans, comfortable shirts, my good walking shoes. The scarf I'd never worn. The jewellery box with my mother's pearls, the ones I'd been saving to give to Emma someday, though Emma had never asked about them and probably never would. The house key was on my keyring, the one I kept in my purse. I'd been given it 3 years ago, right after I moved in. "So you don't have to knock," David had said, smiling, grateful, relieved to have me there. I took it off the ring now, set it on the nightstand. By 10 a.m. the suitcase was packed. Not full. I didn't have much here that was truly mine. Just the essentials, just enough. I changed into better clothes. Jeans, a blouse, my cardigan. I brushed my hair, put on lipstick for the first time in weeks. In the mirror, I looked almost like myself again. The house was quiet. David had left for work. Rachel wouldn't be home until evening. The kids were at daycare. I'd driven them there myself at 8. Just like always, though this time I'd hugged them a little longer, kissed their foreheads, told them I loved them. They'd squirmed away, impatient to get to their friends. I wrote a note, short, direct. Gone to stay with Evelyn for a while, need some space. Don't worry, Mum. I left it on the kitchen counter, held down by the salt shaker. Then I picked up my suitcase, my purse, and walked to the front door. The park across the street called to me. I'd sat on that bench 100 times, pretending I was just enjoying the sunshine, not hiding, not escaping for 20 minutes of my own space. I went there now, sat with my suitcase beside me, my hands folded on my lap, and let the morning settle around me. A jogger passed, a woman with a stroller, a maintenance worker emptying trash cans. None of them looked at me twice. I was just an old woman on a bench, invisible again, but this time by choice. The clarity came slowly, then all at once. I wasn't needed. I'd been useful. There was a difference. Needed meant they couldn't function without me. Useful meant they preferred not to. The moment they'd stopped asking, "Can you?" and started assuming, "You will," that was the moment I'd stopped being a person and became a service. I stood, picked up my suitcase. The handle was worn smooth from decades of use, the leather strap soft and familiar in my hand. Robert smiled at me from inside my purse, tucked into the side pocket where I'd placed his photo that morning. "Time to go," I whispered. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. I'd taken the bus here plenty of times, running errands, picking up groceries. I knew the routes, the schedules. I knew how to leave. The bus came. I got on, paid the fare with coins from my purse, and I didn't look back. Evelyn lived in a senior apartment complex on the west side of town, the kind with a community room and potted plants in the lobby. We'd been friends since our 30s, back when our boys played Little League together. She'd lost her husband 7 years ago, a year after Robert. We'd grieved together, supported each other, met for coffee every few weeks. Until I'd moved in with David, and coffee every few weeks became phone calls every few months. I stood outside her building with my suitcase and called her cell. "Margaret?" She answered on the second ring, surprised. "What's wrong?" "I need a place to stay for a few days. Can I come up?" Silence. Then, Of course you can. 5th floor, apartment 512. She met me at the door in yoga pants and a paint-stained t-shirt, her grey hair pulled back in a messy bun. She took one look at me, at my suitcase, and pulled me inside without questions. Her apartment was small but bright, full of plants and books and photographs. Real photographs, framed and loved and dusted, not forgotten on nightstands. "Sit," she said, guiding me to the couch. "I'll make tea." I sat. The couch was soft, well worn. The window looked out over a garden courtyard. It was quiet in a different way than David's house, not empty, just peaceful. Evelyn brought tea in mismatched mugs and sat beside me, waiting. "I left," I said finally. "David's?" "Yes." "Good," she said, and the simple certainty in her voice made something crack open in my chest. I told her everything. The 3 years, the invisibility, the phone calls, the comments, the slow erasure of who I'd been before. She listened without interrupting, her hand on mine squeezing occasionally. When I finished, she said, "You can stay as long as you need." "I don't want to impose, Margaret." She cut me off gently. "You're not imposing, you're escaping. There's a difference." I stayed in her guest room that night. It was smaller than the room at David's, but it felt bigger somehow. Mine. Temporary, yes, but mine by choice, not by default. My phone rang at 7 p.m. David's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings, 4, 5. Then I answered. "Mum, where are you? Your note says Evelyn's, but you didn't leave a number, and I'm at Evelyn's." "What's going on?" "Rachel's freaking out. The kids are asking. I needed some space." "Space? Mum, you can't just leave without talking to us. We need you here. Emma has dance tomorrow. Oliver needs his parents," I said quietly. "Emma needs you and Rachel, not me." That's not fair. You know we appreciate. Do you? The words came out harder than I'd intended. Do you appreciate me, David? Or do you appreciate the free childcare, the cooking and cleaning and 24/7 availability? Silence on the other end, long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. That's not fair, he said again, but his voice was different now, defensive, uncertain. I'll call you in a few days, I said. I need some time. Mum. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else, something that felt almost like strength. Evelyn knocked softly on the door, poked her head in. You okay? I hung up on my son. Good. I laughed, surprised by the sound. When was the last time I'd laughed? Come on, Evelyn said. I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta. But it's hot, and there's wine, and you look like you could use both. We ate at her small dining table, the one covered with a cheerful yellow tablecloth and a vase of fresh daisies. The pasta was simple, the wine cheap but good. We talked about nothing important, her book club, the community garden, the new residents in the building. Normal conversation between friends, between equals. I'd forgotten what that felt like. That night, lying in Evelyn's guest bed, I heard my phone buzz. Texts from David, then Rachel, then David again. I didn't read them, not yet. Instead, I looked at the ceiling, at the unfamiliar shadows, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Relief. The next morning I woke without an alarm. No crying baby, no rushed breakfast prep, no schedule demanding my presence. Evelyn made coffee and we sat on her tiny balcony, watching the sunrise through the trees. The air smelled like summer and freedom. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. I need to find an apartment, I think. Something small, something mine. There are vacancies in this building. I can ask the manager. I can't afford Margaret. She gave me a look. You have retirement savings, Robert's life insurance, your own money. You've been living rent-free and spending nothing for 3 years. You can afford it. She was right. I'd been thinking of myself as dependent for so long, I'd forgotten I wasn't. Okay, I said. Yes, thank you. My phone rang again. David. This time I sent it to voicemail. Then I called the building manager and asked about apartments. The building manager showed me 3 apartments the next afternoon. Small 1-bedrooms, all nearly identical, all clean and functional and empty. I chose the one on the 3rd floor with windows facing east, the morning light, the garden courtyard below. When can I move in? I asked. 1st of the month. That's 10 days from now. I'll need first and last month's rent, security deposit. I wrote the check right there, my hand steady, my mind clear. $3,000, a drop in the bucket of my savings, but it felt enormous, real, mine. Welcome home, the manager said, handing me a lease to review. Home. I signed the papers that evening at Evelyn's dining table, reading every line, initialing every page. Official, binding, irreversible. My phone rang. Rachel this time. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message later, standing in Evelyn's kitchen while she pretended not to eavesdrop. Rachel's voice was tight with anger, the careful politeness stripped away. I don't know what you think you're doing, Margaret, but you can't just abandon your family like this. The kids are upset. Oliver keeps asking for you. Emma thinks she did something wrong. David won't talk to me. This is incredibly selfish, and frankly, I'm shocked. I thought you were better than this. Call me back. Selfish. I saved the message, played it back. Selfish because I'd stopped being available every second. Selfish because I'd chosen myself just once after 3 years of choosing them first. I didn't call her back. Instead, I went to the grocery store the next morning, alone, without a list of things other people needed, and bought food I liked. Good bread, fancy cheese, strawberries, a bottle of wine that cost more than $12. I went to the library and got a new card, browsed the stacks, checked out 3 books, ones I'd wanted to read for months but never had time for. I made an appointment with my doctor for a checkup I'd been putting off for 2 years. Scheduled a dentist appointment. Called the hair salon I used to go to before David's house, and my routine there consumed everything. Small things, practical things, mine. David showed up at Evelyn's apartment on day 4. I saw him through the peephole, hesitated, then opened the door. He looked tired. Older than I remembered, though it had only been 4 days. Lines around his eyes I hadn't noticed before. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped back. Let him in. Evelyn was at her book club. I was alone. We sat in the living room, careful space between us, the air thick with things unsaid. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "about what I said on the phone. The taking up space thing. I didn't mean you did mean it," I said quietly. "You just didn't mean for me to hear it." He flinched, looked at his hands. "We took you for granted," he said after a long moment. "I took you for granted. You were just always there, and I stopped thinking about what that meant. What it cost you." It was a real apology, maybe. "What do you want, David?" "I want you to come home." "That's not my home." "Mom, it's your home. You and Rachel and the kids." But it stopped being mine somewhere along the way. We need you. You need childcare, you need a cook, you need someone to do the laundry and pick up the dry cleaning and make sure the house runs smoothly, but you don't need me. You need a service I was providing. His jaw tightened. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Silence, heavy, weighted, pressing down on both of us. "I signed a lease," I said, "for an apartment. I move in next week." "You're really not coming back?" "No." He stood, his movements stiff, angry, or hurt, maybe both. "Rachel's right," he said. "This is selfish." "Yes," I agreed, "it is." He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click, not a slam. I sat there on Evelyn's couch for a long time, waiting to feel guilty. It didn't come. That evening, Evelyn and I went to dinner at a small Italian place downtown. We split a bottle of wine, ordered dessert, stayed until they were putting chairs on tables. "How do you feel?" Evelyn asked as we walked back to her car. "Scared," I admitted, "but good." "Is that strange?" "No." She squeezed my hand. "It's not strange at all." Oliver's birthday was in 2 weeks. I bought him a card, wrote a short note, included a $20 bill. I addressed it to David and Rachel's house, stamped it and mailed it. I didn't include a return address. My grandson, 3 years old, barely old enough to remember this time later. I loved him fiercely, ached to see him, but I understood now that loving him didn't mean sacrificing myself to be his built-in babysitter. I could be his grandmother from a distance, on new terms, or not at all if that's what they chose. It was up to them now. I moved into the apartment on July 1st. Evelyn helped me, along with 2 volunteers from the senior centre who offered to carry boxes up the stairs. I didn't have boxes, really. Just my suitcase, some shopping bags with new towels and sheets, and a few things Evelyn had given me. A lamp, a set of dishes, a small bookshelf. The apartment was empty and bright, and mine. I stood in the middle of the living room after everyone left, listening to the silence. It wasn't oppressive anymore. It was possibility. I bought furniture slowly. A couch from a consignment shop, a kitchen table from IKEA, the first thing I'd ever assembled myself. A bed frame, a dresser, a reading chair for the corner by the window. Each purchase felt like reclamation. I hung Robert's photo above the dresser, dusted it clean, and smiled at him. "What do you think?" I asked. He smiled back, forever 59, forever proud of me. I joined the library's volunteer program, Tuesday and Thursday mornings, shelving books, helping patrons with the computers, running the children's story hour on Saturdays. It felt good to be useful by choice, not default. I started going to a cafe on Wednesday mornings, ordered the same thing, black coffee, blueberry scone, and sat by the window reading. The barista learned my name by the 3rd week. "The usual, Margaret?" she'd ask, smiling, and I'd nod, feeling seen. 6 weeks after I left, I wrote to Oliver. Not a letter exactly, a card. Bright colours, a cartoon dinosaur on the front. Inside, simple words. "Grandma loves you. See you soon." I included my new address. I wasn't sure if David would let him respond. Wasn't sure if he'd even show Oliver the card. But 2 weeks later, I got a crayon drawing in the mail. Stick figures, a tall one labelled Oliver and a shorter one labelled Grammar. A yellow sun, grass. A house with a red roof that wasn't David's house or mine, just the universal house of childhood imagination. I cried when I opened it. Then I hung it on my refrigerator and smiled every time I looked at it. In September, David called. "Oliver wants to see you," he said without preamble. "I'd like that." "Rachel thinks it's a bad idea. She thinks you'll—" He stopped. "She thinks I'll what? Corrupt him? Tell him the truth about how you treated me? Mum." "I would never do that to him," I said, "but I'm also not coming back to your house. If Oliver wants to see me, you can bring him here, or I can meet you at the park." Silence. Then, "The park. Saturday at 2. I'll be there." I arrived early, sat on the same bench where I'd had my moment of clarity, and waited. David's car pulled up at 2:15. Oliver tumbled out, saw me, and ran. Grammar. I caught him, held him tight, breathed in the scent of apple juice and kid shampoo and love. "Hi, baby," I whispered. David hung back by the car. Rachel stayed inside, arms crossed, sunglasses on. Oliver and I played at the playground. I pushed him on the swings, helped him climb the ladder to the slide, sat with him in the sandbox and built castles that wouldn't last. An hour later, David approached. "We should go." "Okay." I kissed Oliver's forehead. "I love you, Grandma." David walked him back to the car. Then he turned, came back to where I sat on the bench. "Can we talk?" "We're talking. I mean really talk." Rachel and we need to understand why you left, why you won't come back. I told you why. But we apologized. We said we're sorry. What more do you want? I looked at him. My son, 46 years old, successful, a good father in many ways, but also someone who'd forgotten I was a person with needs beyond serving his family. "I don't want an apology," I said. "I want boundaries. I want to be your mother, not your housekeeper. I want to be Oliver's grandmother, not his unpaid nanny. I want you to see me when I walk into a room. We see you, do you?" He looked away. "I'm not coming back, David, but I'm here. This is my address. You know my phone number. If you want me in your life, in Oliver's life, in Emma's life, it has to be on different terms." "What terms?" "Ones we decide together, where I'm asked, not assumed, where I have my own life and you have yours, and we visit because we want to, not because you need something from me." He nodded slowly. "I'll talk to Rachel." "You do that?" He left. The car pulled away. Oliver waved from the back window. I waved back, my heart full and broken at the same time. 2 weeks later, they showed up at my apartment. David, Rachel, both kids. Rachel looked uncomfortable. David looked determined. "We want to try," Rachel said stiffly. "What you said?" "New terms." "Okay," I said. "Come in." We sat in my small living room. I served juice boxes to the kids, coffee to the adults. We talked, carefully at first, Then, more honestly, it wasn't perfect. Rachel was still defensive. David still didn't fully understand. But it was a beginning. When they left, David hugged me at the door. "I missed you," he said. "I missed you too," I admitted, "but I don't miss who I had to be in your house." He nodded. I get that now. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Time would tell. But for the first time in 3 years, I didn't care if he understood or not. I'd understood myself. That was enough. Fall arrived. The leaves in the courtyard garden turned gold and red. I bought a coat I liked, bright blue wool, and wore it to the grocery store, to the library, to the cafe where I'd become a regular. I celebrated my 75th birthday in October. Evelyn took me to dinner, and the library volunteers surprised me with a cake. Simple, sweet, mine. No one from my family called. But 3 days later, a letter arrived. David's handwriting on the envelope, careful and deliberate. I made tea before I opened it, sat at my kitchen table, the afternoon light streaming through the east-facing windows, and read. Dear Mum, I've been trying to write this letter for weeks. Rachel says I'm overthinking it. Maybe I am. I'm sorry. Not the shallow kind of sorry I said before when you first left. The real kind. The kind that means I understand what I did wrong. I took you for granted. Worse than that, I erased you. You became part of the furniture, part of the routine, part of the infrastructure of our lives. I stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs, your own life, your own dreams. You gave up 3 years for us. You helped us when we needed it, and instead of thanking you, instead of treating you with dignity and respect, we just took more and more until there was nothing left of you that was yours. I don't know if you can forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it. But I want you to know I see it now. I see what I did. What we did. Oliver asks about you all the time. Emma made you a drawing enclosed. Rachel is working on things. She has a hard time admitting when she's wrong, but she knows she was wrong about this. I love you, Mom. I always have. I just forgot to show it in any way that mattered. Can we try again? Different this time. Better. Love, David. Inside the envelope, folded carefully, was a crayon drawing from Emma, a stick figure with curly hair labelled Grandma standing next to a house, flowers around her feet, a huge smile on her face. I cried, not the wrenching sobs of grief, but the quiet tears of something shifting, something healing. I kept the letter on my kitchen table for 2 days, reading it, thinking about it, deciding what to say back. Finally, I wrote my own letter. Short, honest. Dear David, thank you for your letter. It meant more than you know. I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means moving forward together in a new way. I'm building a life here. It's small, but it's mine. I have routines I love, friends who see me, space that belongs to me alone. I won't give that up again. But I want you in my life. Oliver and Emma too. Rachel, if she's willing, we can visit, have dinners, celebrate birthdays and holidays. But I'm not your backup childcare. I'm not your default solution to problems. I'm your mother, and I need you to treat me like a person, not a service. If you can do that, I'm here. Love, Mum. I mailed it the next day. David called a week later. We'll do better, he said. I promise. Good, I said. I'll hold you to that. Thanksgiving came. They invited me to dinner. I almost said no. Old habits, old fears of falling back into the role I'd escaped. But Evelyn convinced me. Go, she said, but leave when you want to. You're a guest now, not staff. I went. Brought a pie I'd bought from the bakery, not made myself. Wore my new blue coat. Arrived at 2, stayed until 5, then left when I was ready. David drove me home. At the door to my building, he hugged me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. It's different now, he said. Isn't it? Yes, I agreed. It is. Christmas was easier. They came to my apartment this time, brought gifts, stayed for cocoa and cookies. Oliver sat on my lap and told me about kindergarten. Emma showed me her report card, all A's. Rachel thanked me for the scarf I'd given her, and I thought she might have meant it. Small steps. Careful progress. A new foundation being built, slowly, where the old one had crumbled. Winter gave way to early spring. I turned 75 and a half, silly to count half birthdays at my age, but I did anyway. Evelyn threw me a small party. The library volunteers came. So did David, Rachel, and the kids. We ate cake in my small living room, crowded but happy. And I looked around at the life I'd built and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, not perfection or resolution or a fairy tale ending. Just peace. The quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing who you are, what you need, and having the strength to choose yourself. The suitcase sat in my closet now, empty and ready if I ever needed it again. The house key I'd left behind had been replaced with a new one, to a new lock, on a new door that was mine alone. Robert's photos sat on my dresser, dusted and loved, and no longer a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd learned. The wedding ring still sat on my finger, but it meant something different now, not just a symbol of the 43 years I'd been someone's wife, but a reminder that I'd survived, that I'd been loved once and that I'd learned to love myself again. Spring came fully, warm and bright and new. I sat on my balcony one morning in April, coffee in hand, watching the garden below come to life. Tulips bloomed in the flower beds. A robin built a nest in the tree outside my window. The silence around me had weight, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. I thought about the woman I'd been 4 years ago when Robert died, lost, grieving, looking for purpose. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, invisible and exhausted, convinced that being needed was the same as being valued. I thought about the woman I was now, different, smaller in some ways. My world had contracted to this apartment, this routine, this careful life, but bigger too, fuller, more mine. David called once a week now, usually on Sunday mornings. We talked about the kids, about work, about nothing much. Sometimes Rachel got on the phone too, her voice still careful, but warmer than before. Oliver sent me drawings. Emma wrote me letters, practicing her cursive, telling me about school and friends and the book she was reading. I visited once a month, sometimes twice, but I always left when I was ready, always came home to my own space, my own bed, my own peace. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when David forgot, when he asked instead of assuming, but his tone suggested he expected me to say yes. There were still times when Rachel's gratitude felt performative, like she was checking a box rather than truly seeing me. But it was better, and better was enough. I'd learned something in the year since I'd left. You can love your family and not let them consume you. You can set boundaries and still be kind. You can choose yourself and not be selfish. You can be 75 years old and start over. If you're reading this, and I think you might be, because maybe you see yourself in me, in this story, then I want you to hear this. Your worth is not measured by what you provide, not by the meals you cook, the children you watch, the laundry you fold, the space you take up or don't take up. You are a person, full, complex, valuable. You are not furniture, you are not infrastructure. You are not defined by your utility to others. And if you've been invisible for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be seen, if you've been used and taken for granted and erased so gradually that you didn't notice until you were gone, then I want you to know it's not too late. It's never too late to pack your suitcase, hand back the key, and walk out the door toward something that's yours. It will be hard. There will be guilt, loneliness, doubt. People will call you selfish. They might not understand. They might never forgive you, but you will forgive yourself, and you will learn to breathe again. That's what I learned. I learned that silence can be peaceful instead of painful. I learned that small spaces can feel bigger than houses when they're yours. I learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and eventually for your family is to say no, just once, just loud enough, and mean it. The robin outside my window sang. The coffee in my cup was still warm. The morning stretched ahead of me, full of nothing in particular and everything that mattered. I had a library shift at 10, lunch with Evelyn at noon, a new book waiting on my nightstand, a phone call to make to David later on my terms when I felt like it. Small things, simple things, mine. I finished my coffee, smiled at Robert's photo on the dresser inside, and I felt for the first time in longer than I could remember like myself again, complete, whole, free.